I just finally came to the realization and acceptance that this wasn't what I believed in and that I was eventually someday, like everyone else, going to die. At that point, I started thinking to myself, if that's the case, am I really going to allow myself to be trapped in the situation for some still prime years of my life?
I was just kind of like, okay, now what? What do I do? How do I make decisions? How do I make friends? How do I talk to people? What do I do with my spare time? What's a hobby? Like, I just didn't know how to do anything, and I didn't know how to even approach starting to do anything.
Something that folks get wrong about JWs is that they're harmless. You might know some really kind, sweet people who happen to be witnesses. We all know them. But you know as well as I do that if Bethel told them to murder somebody, they would.
You're listening to This Is What It Feels Like, where we tell stories that deserve to be heard directly from those who have lived them. I'm Tara Lopez. I grew up living two lives. I had a life with my mother where we were able to celebrate birthdays, holidays, we played organized sports, and we were encouraged to make friends at school. Typical joyous childhood experiences. And then I had a life with my father and his family where I was fully immersed in the Jehovah's Witness congregation. There were no holidays, no birthdays, no celebrations, and no outside friends. Most of us have met a Jehovah's Witness at some point in our lives. Whether you've had them knock at your door or if you've ran into them at a park, Jehovah's Witnesses are out in the world trying to spread their message through literature, conversation, and persistence. We've seen them out in the world, but what is their message? What do Jehovah's Witnesses believe? First thing is that Jehovah's Witnesses believe that the world is going to end soon in what is called Armageddon. And they have predicted this happening throughout the last 100+ years. First in 1914 during World War I, and then again in 1975. And now they believe Armageddon is just right around the corner. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that during Armageddon, 144,000 Jehovah's Witnesses are going to be chosen to live in heaven with Jesus. The remaining witnesses are going to survive and live in what they call paradise. Think humans in harmony with zero violence, no famine, there's green fields everywhere, happiness abounds, a pure, true utopia. And those that are not Jehovah's Witnesses will be killed in the most brutal of ways. And what will be left are Jehovah's Witnesses in paradise forever. Growing up, constantly hearing about paradise and Armageddon, the end of days, it left me in a strange state of wanting to do good and be good because I didn't want to die, but it also stressed me out as a kid. I remember feeling so anxious all the time, feeling judged, picked at, scrutinized. And I've always wondered if other people who grew up as Jehovah's Witnesses and then later left the organization struggled with certain aspects that I still struggle with today. Social anxiety, isolation, loneliness, and shame. For the first time, I shared space with individuals who truly understand what the potential long-term impacts of growing up in and choosing to leave this organization can be. People who experienced abandonment, depression, anxiety, PTSD, and trauma. Jehovah's Witnesses are known for their strict and firm rules, including shunning members who leave or are expelled. It's an extremely difficult organization to leave, and as you will hear in this episode, doing so can result in the uprooting of one's entire life. In this episode, you're going to hear from Julie and Tony, two individuals who were essentially born into the Jehovah's Witness organization. You'll hear about what it was like to grow up as a Jehovah's Witness, how it affected their views of the world, how difficult it was to leave the organization, and what life is like for them beyond the faith. You'll also hear from 5 other people who sent in voice memos of their experiences growing up as Jehovah's Witnesses. You'll hear some commonalities, such as abandonment, manipulation tactics, a severe disconnect from the outside world, and how these individuals who left were able to reclaim their lives and start to live freely. This is what it feels like to leave the Jehovah's Witnesses.
My name is Tony Rasonsky. I'm 47 years old, and I currently live in Oakland, California.
Tony was born and raised in Fairfax, California. Both of his grandmothers converted as Jehovah's Witnesses before he was born, so Tony was born into the congregation.
I was raised in this family where that was all I ever knew. This is the truth. This is the way.
Since everyone in his family were Jehovah's Witnesses, Tony says that he never even thought to question it.
I bought in entirely, went to school, and I was proud to tell kids around me about how I had the truth and about the way they were living their life wasn't correct. I look back on it now and I understand why kids, I was kind of viewed as a little bit of a outcast and had a hard time, with a lot of bullying. A lot of it was, because I brought it on myself in a way.
Due to the bullying he endured and the Jehovah's Witnesses' belief that the world would be ending soon, Tony found it difficult to care and invest in school.
When you're told that this world's passing away, that the world is going to be, as we know it, is going to be destroyed, replaced with just righteous people living on it. And so I go to school and I didn't care about learning. School didn't benefit me in a social or an educational way. It was a really lost experience for me.
Not being able to participate in holiday or birthday celebrations at school left Tony feeling even more alienated from his classmates.
It was the kind of thing where there'd be a birthday party especially when I was in grade school, and kids were bringing cupcakes and, having treats and celebrating each other. And, if word wasn't going to get back, I might have a cupcake. And, there's a little part of me that's saying, don't do it. You're not supposed to do this. Valentine's Day, I'm not writing cards to anyone. But at the same time, I also felt very left out and bummed out that, I wasn't part of that celebration. So I think, again, it was one of those kind of things where you are telling yourself, I'm doing the right thing, and you're trying your hardest not to be jealous or want to partake. But I felt like I was missing out. This little internal battle going on with, little Tony.
As Tony entered high school, he found it even more difficult to care about his education. So his parents opted to do what a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses do. They homeschooled him his junior year.
I didn't have the interest in really learning, so I really had 2 years where my education really stopped as a sophomore. As far as getting my full, high school experience, it wasn't in the cards for me.
Tony devoted all of his free time to the congregation. His father was an elder there. In the Jehovah's Witness congregation, elders are men who are appointed to lead the congregation and oversee meetings, judicial committees, and investigations. These men essentially hold all the power. It was decided that Tony would go to Bethel, the Jehovah's Witness headquarters in New York, to work for the organization for 2 years. He was 19 years old.
Everything, again, was like just kind of planned out for me. There wasn't, ever a, hey, what do you want to do? What's your passion? What are your goals in life? Every single part of my life was, here is the best way forward for you. Go ahead and follow that path.
My name is Julie Cassotta. I live in Carmichael, California, and I am 40 years old.
Julie was born and raised in the Sacramento area. She was 4 years old when her parents decided to become Jehovah's Witnesses. She still doesn't know exactly why her parents made this decision.
All I can do is assume they were in their mid-30s at that time. So if I think about where I was at in my mid-30s, if I had 2 little kids, maybe I would feel a little bit lost or like wanting community. That all kind of like makes sense to me, that like someone would come to your door and just happen to tell you exactly what you were looking for at the time.
Julie went to public school and describes her childhood as lonely, always feeling a bit like she was on the outside looking in.
I felt like an outsider my entire existence as a young person, basically. But I was always like, too weird for the kids at school. But then I was also like, not quite a good enough Jehovah's Witness for the kids in the church. So I was always kind of like, never quite felt like I fit anywhere. The main thing that I feel and remember when I think about my childhood is loneliness. I just remember being like alone a lot. And I mean, I had like quote unquote friends in the congregation, but they're like friends by proximity and not like real connections. And then friends at school, I could only see them at school. So it's really hard to build and maintain actual friendships and relationships when you can only communicate on like break. So yeah, I felt very like kind of other most of my life. I felt like I was missing out all the time. I wanted so badly to do and be like just a normal kid. do normal kid things, like do after school activities, go to dances, be on a team. I was really into dance. I really wanted to be on a dance team. I was really into swimming too. And I always loved swimming and being in the water. But I just knew it wouldn't even be an option. So there was no point in even asking my parents.
You just said quite a few things that resonated with me and how I've always felt, that I always felt lonely as a child, even though there were so many people around me and there was a community and the congregation, but I did feel othered. And like you said, not feeling good enough to be with the Jehovah's Witness kids. And then also just not being able to participate in typical activities at school.
Yeah.
And that loneliness, that's so wild to me because I always felt that, but I didn't really associate it until you just said it now with being a part of that community.
Yeah, I don't think I made that association until, I don't know, probably in the last decade. Right before you came over, I was reviewing a journal from my early 20s, and I was very angsty and very stressy, depressy, just sad girl. And most of it is pathetic. But like my biggest takeaway from it was I mentioned being alone or lonely on almost every page for years. And it's just kind of wild to me that I think it's because I was never really taught how to make genuine connections with people. I had to like learn that as I went, and which was so much further behind other people my age. Just kind of led to the feeling of loneliness continuing for ages.
Like Tony and Julie, listeners also expressed feeling left out during childhood.
I'm not allowed to celebrate holidays or birthdays. The reasoning is because 2 times the Bible had mentioned birthdays, something bad happened. They take that as a sign not to celebrate it. You know, I often felt like I had missed out, and I almost felt like I had a certain stigma addressed to me because of it.
I didn't celebrate any holidays. I didn't celebrate birthdays. I wasn't allowed to say bless you if someone sneezed. I wasn't allowed to say, oh my God, because that was taking God's name in vain. No Harry Potter, no, just nothing. And so I felt really weird and left out and very awkward as a kid, especially at school. School was the hardest because I had to explain why I couldn't have a birthday cupcake or why I had to go sit alone in the library while everybody else made Mother's Day cards.
Tony was 19 when he was told he was going to Bethel, New York, to work at the Jehovah's Witness headquarters.
It all happens in real time so fast where you don't realize that, you know, you're 13 and you're going to high school, and then you suddenly are on a plane headed to New York. Because once I got there, I didn't know what I was in for.
In 1909, Charles Taze Russell, founder of the Jehovah's Witnesses, decided to move the JW headquarters from Pittsburgh to Brooklyn, aiming to expand the congregation by adding his Bible sermons to newspapers. The move was successful, with over 2,000 newspapers soon publishing his sermons. The properties acquired became known as Bethel. Bethel was designed to produce all Jehovah's Witnesses literature, and those living and working there don't receive wages, but are given room, board, and a small allowance. Everyone has specific roles, whether in offices, kitchens, printing plants, or maintenance. In 2009, Jehovah's Witnesses began relocating their headquarters to upstate New York, with a new 1.6 million square foot headquarters. They sold the Brooklyn Bethel complex in stages, ultimately earning over $700 million by 2017. But in the 90s, Tony flew out to the original Brooklyn headquarters, where he lived and worked for 2 years.
And my schedule over the next 2 years became a wake up at 6:00 in the morning, get yourself down to the cafeteria, which was set up where you had an assigned table. You had to be there by 7. From 7 to 7:15, they had a morning worship where it was led by one of the members of the governing body. So you'd get your 15 minutes in the morning where they'd read a scripture. Then you'd eat. You'd have 20 minutes to scarf down some food, family style. You had a table head who was there to make sure that you were there every day to like kind of check in with you. So you were being monitored without knowing it. Then you would have a half hour to get from there to work. You'd work from 8 to 4. And then at 4 on your way home, you had a chance to stop at one of the dining rooms to either have dinner or grab a Tupperware and take that back to your room. From there, every single evening was Mondays were family worship. Tuesday nights and Thursday nights were for meetings. And I had Wednesday night to myself. Every day pretty much was from 6 in the morning until 9 or 10 at night. My schedule was full, where at 19, 20 years old, by the end of the week, I would spend Saturday just sleeping. My life was really, really regimented. I had aspirations. I had things that I wanted to do. I was really into art, but it wasn't encouraged. And not that it needed to be encouraged by other people, but in some cases, it was actively discouraged.
Tony lived with 2 roommates in the tower building dorms. He describes the environment there as almost Big Brother-like, with housekeepers and staff watching his every move.
When we would leave for the day, housekeepers would go throughout the whole place to go through these rooms that were left in great shape, but they would do the, dusting, vacuuming, but they also would be keeping an eye out for items that you shouldn't have there.
He recalls a time when a workmate of his got an unsettling call from the congregation.
And he looks like he'd seen a ghost. He says, "Hey, I just got a phone call and I need to go down to the home overseer wants to see me at my building." So he comes back and I find out from him that they'd found some of his music. I think it was something not very edgy. It was like REM's Monster. And when he goes to his room, there's like 2 brothers waiting there for him. And they said, "Hey, we'd like to go through your music." And at that point, they had gone through his drawers and they'd pulled out his CD collection. So I remember one of the things he told me was they had a John Spencer Blues Explosion CD. And I think there's a song called like The World of Sex or something like that. And they asked him, they're like, "How do you feel about this? Is this something Jehovah would approve of?" And I can't remember if he told them or not, but he like sarcastically told me later, he's like, "It's an instrumental song." So there's not even any lyrics to go along with it. They're like, "Hey, we've gone through all your CDs now. What we want to do is we're going to leave them all with you. And we want you to put them in a brown paper bag. And we want you to take them down to this building at this time tomorrow morning. And you're going to leave them there. And the things that you feel aren't appropriate to keep, you leave with us. And the things that you feel like would be acceptable in Jehovah's eyes, you can keep." And of course, he just decided to give it all up because he didn't want to, run into any trouble. There was a little bit of a, just like there is, I think, throughout the whole organization, there's a little bit of a Big Brother thing where, hey, if my roommate has a CD collection that's got some inappropriate stuff and I know about it and I don't tell them and report him, I could get in trouble. So it kind of pits everyone against each other.
Ever since I can remember, music has been my entire life. My mom would buy me all of the latest R&B CDs by Brandy, Aaliyah, TLC. But when I would go to my dad's house, I'd have to hide my music from him because he was strict about what I listened to. And those artists certainly didn't fit into what Jehovah's Witnesses deemed acceptable. In fact, they were deemed worldly music. So I'd hide my stash of CDs under my bed. But one day when I was about 11 years old, my dad discovered this stash and confronted me with them. He took me outside to the trash can and broke each CD in half, one by one, lecturing me on why we don't listen to worldly music. I was heartbroken. Julie could relate to this level of strictness, but luckily when it came to music, her parents were a lot more lenient.
They gave me a lot of freedom in my self-expression in how I dressed, and I had kind of wild hair, and they gave me a lot of freedom in that way. And my dad is a musician, so he never put any barriers on what music we could listen to. Like I would be blasting Deftones in my room at, 16 years old, and my dad would just be like, "Okay, she's in her feels today." My dad knew that there was no harm in listening to the music that resonated with me, so he wasn't going to stop us from that.
But even though her parents let her listen to whatever she wanted, they were still strict in other ways. So no birthdays,
Definitely not.
no holidays.
Definitely not.
Were you able to date as a teenager?
No, absolutely not. Hard no.
Really? It was just off the table?
Off the table. Yeah. That didn't stop me, but I got caught every time. I certainly tried though. Yeah, I liked boys in my class and I tried to date them. But, no teenage boy wants a girlfriend that he can only see at school.
It was this strict environment that led Julie to start questioning her faith when she was 15.
I definitely was questioning everything and really starting to see hypocrisies and things. Or I would ask questions that just had dumb answers where I'm like, that's the answer? Really? We're all just going by that. Okay. It just wasn't making sense to me. And I was really unhappy. And I remember the start of my junior year of high school, I made a little deal with myself. And I said that I was going to live that year, that school year, as the perfect Jehovah's Witness girl. I was going to do everything I was supposed to do, not do the things I'm not supposed to do. I was just going to be the perfect angel. And I did pretty well that year, but I hated it. I hated every moment of it. I was even more miserable than before. Living a quote unquote double life was way better than just trying to be a good Jehovah's Witness girl. And so after that, I was like, all right, I tried. I'm done.
Julie says that she felt like she couldn't be her true self that year and realized that being a Jehovah's Witness wasn't right for her.
I had to stifle everything about myself, my actual personality. And I felt like I had no say in anything. I didn't get to make a single choice. It was this day we're going to this meeting, this day we're going to this meeting, and then we're going to go knock door to door, and then we're going to go over to this people's house because they're having problems, and you're going to hang out with their children while we talk. Everything was orchestrated and scheduled, and it just was miserable. I was just counting down the days till it was over because it was my own little deal.
And no one else knew about this deal?
No, I never told anyone. Mm-mm.
So you had this year that you devoted to being the best Jehovah's Witness that you could be. And after that year, you realized that you would prefer living the double life.
Yep.
What happened next?
All hell broke loose, basically.
When it came to questioning Jehovah's Witnesses' beliefs, listeners said that they had a tough time.
It was really scary because you are not allowed to question things. You're not allowed to think for yourself. If you do, not only is it going to get you in trouble, but your family is going to face the repercussions from that as well.
Like Julie, Tony was starting to question his faith after watching those around him experience intense punishment.
Before I knew it, I was sneaking out the Bethel dorms at night because you were supposed to go through appropriate exits, wearing appropriate clothing. You couldn't wear any shirts or clothing that had logos on them. You weren't supposed to wear shorts, jeans. I think one of the governing body members had given a little talk about dressing grooming and had said that denim was the material of the devil or something like that. But we found exits out of the buildings that weren't being watched. We would leave, we would go skateboarding in the city. I started going to shows. I started finding ways to still keep a little bit of my individuality. And I think that was where the seeds were starting to be planted, where even at that point, I was having an internal struggle with being in the organization.
At Bethel, Tony worked at the warehouse where he was in charge of domestic shipping. He describes Bethel as a place with limited job opportunities and little room for growth.
Some people would rise through the ranks and, have positions of authority within the organization. But for the most part, they would just use people for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And when they had no more use, they would send them back out into the world. And these people would have no real resume or skill to help them move on to the next part of life. So for me, after being there for 2 years, I didn't have anything to, what was I going to throw into a resume and try and use as, to get a job? Hey, I've been putting religious literature in a box that moves in front of me every few minutes for the last 2 years.
At this time, did you date at all?
I had dated right before I left for Bethel, but of course that was very like, you're only dating if there's a view to marriage. So I had my first girlfriend at 16. We dated for about like a year and a half, but it was very like, I didn't even get the courage up to kiss her for the first time for like 6 months. And it was all just very innocent. While I was at Bethel, I go to this one show. There's this girl there, and the two of us, I forget how we even started talking, but over the course of 2 hours, we ended up just talking. I never told her anything about what I was doing in New York. And before I know it, we're standing there watching this show, holding hands, and we exchanged numbers. And I just wasn't going to ever do anything about that number. I brought it back to my room, and I just kept it in my desk as like this little, like, it's like super sad thinking back about it, but it was like, here's my connection to this thing that seems like it would be a lot of fun and it would be a more normal teenage young man experience. And I had to just keep it hidden in my desk as this little like token of like, man, what would life be if I was able to do the things that I want to be doing right now?
After working at Bethel for 2 years, at 21, Tony moved back to California to be with his family.
During that time, met someone, started dating her, and I, like some Jehovah's Witnesses, had the experience where we took the dating experience a little too far and actually ended up getting in a little bit of trouble.
What kind of trouble, if you don't mind?
I don't mind at all. Her and I were together for about 6 months. We were starting to talk about marriage because you reach the point where you want to fool around. You can't do that unless if you're married. So you start talking about marriage, and it ends up being a, accelerated courtship, and you're walking down the aisle before you know it with someone that you barely know, and you don't absolutely know how you're physically going to be compatible or whether or not you can live together. So her and I, after about 6 months, had a situation where we fooled around a little bit. She calls me the next day and she's like, hey, I feel really guilty about what we did. And I feel bad enough about it that I need to go to the elders about it. And I immediately got off the phone. I'm like, my parents are going to find out. I'm going to have to tell them. So I walk down the hall and I pull my mom and dad into a room and I start telling them about how I didn't go into too much detail, but I told them enough where looking back on it, it's pretty funny to me that, it's really sad that I had to go and admit as a 21-year-old that I'd gotten a blowjob.
And how did they react?
Oh, my dad, I think he shook his head, looked super upset, and says, I'm going to go make some calls. And he called up an elder in our congregation and set up a meeting with the brothers to investigate this whole thing, this whole blowjob.
Oh my gosh. So what does that meeting even entail? What does that look like?
In my case, they didn't make a public announcement about it. So it wasn't a public reproof. It was a private reproof. So they took away all of my responsibilities that I had. I was only allowed to just go out in the ministry until they would give me back my privileges. With her, she ended up getting a public reproof where they actually go up on the stage and they would just say, so-and-so has been reproved. And they don't go into any detail, but now everybody publicly knows that you did something wrong.
It's during this time that Tony starts to really question his faith.
I think I was starting to become disillusioned. I was just trying to figure out, this is supposed to be the truth. This is all I know. This is what everybody that I know and love and respect believes in. Maybe I need to just keep pressing on and doing exactly what they're saying. And at some point it's going to click and I'm going to find the happiness that I'm looking for. And so I kept on doing I'm going to go to the meetings. I'm going to get myself back. I'm going to meet someone. I'm going to get married. I'm going to have kids. I'm going to do the whole thing the way that they're telling me to do it. And so I was being led and just allowing myself to let it happen because I thought that was what was going to lead to happiness. And you don't want to face up to what the other option is because that's going to entail losing your family and your friends and starting all over. And what does starting all over look like when, again, you haven't gone to college, you haven't been engaging in any kind of a skill that you can market or make a living off of. You're going to be starting over with new friends. You're going to lose your family. It's really tough to make that decision. But at that time, yeah, I was absolutely starting to have some doubts that were kept very, very deeply buried.
A common theme amongst listeners was feeling worried about losing their families, friends, and community if they left the Jehovah's Witnesses. Some lived daily with those fears at the forefront of their minds, while others sadly did lose loved ones.
I wasn't sure if my dad and my family on that side were going to love me forever or were going to love me as an adult if I wasn't a Jehovah's Witness as well. Like, I was worrying about the future. I was worrying about the week to come. It over-consumed me, and this led to me not doing well for many years.
Once I officially stopped going to meetings, I just lost all of my friends for good. Nobody reached out to me. It was basically like I was dead, or they just didn't give a fuck. I don't know. I am basically the black sheep of my family. And it's really difficult to be basically hated by your blood relatives for just following your own truth.
In terms of friends, I've sadly lost contact with most of them. There's a few that I am still in somewhat contact with. And with some of those, I do pretend that I'm a witness. And it's weird because it feels silly and immature, but I value the relationship with those people enough that I'm willing to keep the facade. And that is difficult at times.
My decision to leave the organization affected my relationship with my friends and family. Instantly lost everybody you ever were raised with and taught to have as friends. My relationship with my wife and my kids and my family was immediately impacted. And the timing of it was terrible because my wife kicked me out. A couple months later, Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, and that's where I was from. And that's where I ended up being left by my family to face Hurricane Katrina. My relationships with my family has been strained since then.
At 23, Tony moved out of his family's house and lived with roommates who were fellow witnesses. For the next 2 years, he says that he and his roommates skirted the rules of what being a good Jehovah's Witness meant.
There was a lot of late nights drinking. There was a lot of shows that we were going to. I started playing in a band with a couple friends. I did things that would have gotten me in trouble, but I flew under the radar.
Tony was rebelling, but soon became worried that he was going to get caught.
I think I just reached a point where I was like, what are you doing? You're living two lives. You're living a lie. And at the time, I thought the lie was that I was, going out and doing things with worldly people and that I was doing things that I shouldn't do. And I wanted to be a Jehovah's Witness, but really it was the other way around.
Finding himself at a crossroads, Tony decides to try to lean into being a good Jehovah's Witness. He moves back in with his parents, dives back into being heavily involved in the congregation, and at 28 years old, gets married to a fellow witness and has 2 children. Soon, he follows his father's footsteps and becomes an elder in his congregation. But Tony still had not found the happiness he was looking for.
Her and I had no business being married to each other. So I think that was one of the things where it's like in a normal setting had been allowed to spend a couple years seeing each other and maybe have a chance to live with each other, we would have immediately found that we didn't have a lot of common interests, that we didn't really get along, that we weren't, physically, emotionally, mentally, we just weren't a fit for each other. So now at 28, I'm finding myself living in this house with someone that I don't have a strong connection with. Everything in my life, I wasn't doing the things that I wanted to, and I was just kind of going through the motions and unhappy.
Julie was a senior in high school when she realized that being a Jehovah's Witness was not for her. After her year of being a good Jehovah's Witness, she started to rebel.
I got in trouble a lot. I got caught a lot. My car was taken away a lot. My phone was taken away a lot. I was failing school, but I didn't care because I just kind of felt like, whatever, I'm just trying to live my life and not be miserable.
You finally had some freedom for the first time.
Yeah. And I really acted like it. I was getting in trouble a lot. And so my dad, he basically sat me down and he said, you either need to get disfellowshipped, just like excommunicated, basically a punishment, or you can disassociate which is leaving on your own. And until that conversation, I had never heard of disassociating. I didn't know that was an option. And as soon as he explained what it was, I was like, that's what I want to do. I'm doing that.
According to jw.org, the official Jehovah's Witness website, a Jehovah's Witness can resign from the group in 2 ways: by either an oral or written formal request that states their decision to no longer be known as a Jehovah's Witness, or by taking an action that places them outside the organization, such as joining another religious group. Those who are disfellowshipped are formally shunned and expelled from the organization. If a member is disfellowshipped, they're not permitted to speak to other practicing members. Disassociating is different in that the individual gets to decide to leave on their own. It's leaving on your own free will and telling the organization that you wish to no longer be associated with them via a letter. They then read the letter out loud to the congregation.
And that was the part I was really excited about, because that was basically like my big fuck you to the whole congregation. I wish so badly I had a copy of the letter. I remember I rewrote it like 10 times. I tried to sound as like mature as possible. And yeah, I gave my dad the letter and he brought it to the congregation. I didn't go to the meetings and they read it aloud and I was no longer associated.
How did that feel?
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. It was scary because I didn't know what that meant for me and my family and my future. So there was a lot of uncertainties, but it felt so good to basically give the finger to all of these people who were like making my life miserable. And it just felt so good to like make such a major life decision for myself, because I hadn't really been able to do that prior.
How did your family react to you leaving?
So that year was a pretty crazy year in our family. So sometime within that same year, my brother got disfellowshipped and my dad disassociated in the same year. So there was a lot going on in our house.
Hold on. So all within the same year,
Yeah.
your brother, your dad, and you all leave.
Yeah.
Your mom still...
She did. My
She
poor
stayed.
mom, she tried to hang on. I think that was really hard for her. I don't think she ever got disfellowshipped or disassociated. I think she just kind of like fell away. At least I remember her telling me that she didn't have the like friends and support in the congregation that she thought that she would, with my dad leaving and me leaving and my brother getting kicked out. So I think she was like, oh, maybe this isn't the great community I thought it was.
As we sit, Julie reflects on how leaving the Jehovah's Witness community must have felt for her parents.
The older I get and I'm hitting age milestones that my parents were at, and I remember my parents at 40. The only thing I can really think of is that it gives me kind of more empathy for them, because when you're a kid and your parents are 40, you're like, they're adults. They know everything. They know what's best for us. And I'm 40 and I don't know anything. I make mistakes every single day of my life. It gives me a lot of empathy for what my parents were going through. I never really thought about what they were missing. I always thought about like what my brother and I were missing. But I never thought about what they were missing. Their previous friendships that weren't Jehovah's Witnesses. Their family members that weren't Jehovah's Witnesses. It gives me a little more just kind of compassion and understanding for, they were just people trying to raise a family in a way they thought was best.
Do you remember the first time you were able to celebrate your birthday?
I do. It was my 19th birthday. My friend was going to college in San Francisco and she threw me a party in her college housing. And it was wild and we got very drunk and it was the best. And then I cried the whole night because just emotions.
Did you feel, what were those emotions?
I think a lot of like feeling happiness and joy of like finally having this thing, but then also kind of having this grief of like, this is what I've not had for so long. Other than the drinking, it was like innocent fun, like it was just a group of friends hanging out, having a good time. We weren't causing trouble. We weren't doing anything bad, and it was like, why couldn't I have had that all these years? What was the harm in celebrating our entrance into the world?
Was it like difficult for you to start incorporating holidays and birthdays into your life?
It was a little weird, only just because I didn't know it. You know, most families have traditions for those things, especially holidays, and I didn't have any. And so I just was kind of like, what do I do? Like, I want to do Christmas. What does that mean? What do I do? I actually found a photo. Can I grab it?
Please, I'd love to see it. Julie grabs a small stack of old photos. One of the photos is of a small lopsided Christmas tree leaning against a wall.
So that was my very first Christmas tree. I was still living at my parents' house, and I put Christmas lights around my window, and I put that little tree in the window, and I was like, I'm putting Christmas in this house.
Oh my gosh, it's so cute.
And I didn't have ornaments or anything, so it's just decorated with like random things from around my room.
Yeah, I see a toy, some kind of ball.
Yeah, there's just like random, anything little that could sit in a tree, I like put in there.
How does it feel now looking at that picture?
Kind of proud a little bit. I was really happy. It felt really joyful to like participate in this thing that I didn't really know anything about. Yeah.
This tree, it looks like, you know, the little defiant tree. Just like
the little Christmas that could.
Yeah. Tony quickly rose through the ranks in his congregation. He became an elder and recounts a time he was chosen to join a judicial committee to oversee the punishment of a woman who cheated on her husband.
It sounded like there was a lot of emotional abuse that he had been laying on her, and they hadn't been a good physical fit, and she cheated on him with someone at work. So she comes to us. She had all that guilt laid on her head, and she wanted to come forward and confess. So 3 of us meet with her, and during our questioning, she starts talking like a child, and she's crying. And after we questioned her for a little while, she leaves the room, and the other 2 elders, one in particular, was convinced that this was a sign that she wasn't, that she didn't feel bad about what she was doing. He saw it as her making a mockery of what was going on. In retrospect, I mean, none of us had the tools or the understanding to know that she was probably having like a little bit of a mental breakdown in front of us. And instead of wrapping our arms around her and giving her the support that she needed, our answer was, you know, I disagreed. I felt like she should have just received a slap on the wrist, but the other 2 believed that she needed to be disfellowshipped, to be taught a lesson. They didn't feel like she was sorry enough for what she'd done. So that didn't feel good. But then 6 months later, I just happened to be on a break from work, and I go into this ice cream shop. I realized that brushing past me was the same person that had been disfellowshipped, and she was with another sister, a friend of hers from another congregation. They had seen me come in. They had obviously been trying to have a little bit of contact, a little bit of a, you know, under the radar hang, and I had just happened to walk in on it. And so they left the line. They didn't get the ice cream they'd gone in there for. They hadn't had their hangout. They had rushed out to try and avoid being seen because they felt so bad about it. And I just sat there with that for that day, laying there in bed at night and up until now, thinking back on it, and like, just what an awful thing to put someone through.
Tony says that experience in the ice cream shop was the final straw for him.
I would lay in bed at night and suddenly thinking about my own mortality and about the idea of falling asleep in death and there possibly not being anything else, because there isn't going to be a resurrection, because I'm not going to live forever. Because I just finally came to the realization and acceptance that this wasn't what I believed in, and that I was eventually someday, like everyone else, gonna die. At that point, I started thinking to myself, if that's the case, am I really going to allow myself to be trapped in the situation for some still prime years of my life?
So up until that point, had you ever been in love?
I don't think so. If you don't see the point in this world because it's going to be destroyed, well, you don't want to invest in education or work or whatever. You're just trying to get by. And, you know, the same thing with love. If you're told like this is what a person that you're going to marry looks like. They have to like believe the same things that you believe. They have to. It almost gets to the point where it starts to feel a little bit like an arranged marriage.
So you don't want to be married to this person. You don't want to be in this congregation. What do you do?
I decided I was going to go back to school to have a trade. So I went back to school to enter the nursing profession. I started being less held to like, hey, you shouldn't do X, Y, and Z as a Jehovah's Witness. While I was going to school, I started taking some art classes. I met this small group of people, and they just happened to be in most of the other classes I was taking, and we all gravitated towards each other, and we decided like, hey, we all like each other. We're all artists. Let's start getting together once a month, and we'll have a potluck, and we'll bring something that we're currently working on. We'll have dinner, and then we'll critique each other's art.
Tony's wife wasn't okay with this and confronted him one evening after one of these hangouts, telling him that if he went to another one of these gatherings, she was going to go to the elders and tell them about it.
So I was starting to make friends. I was starting to do things that made me happy. I was doing all of those things, and I was having just a little less concern with what's going to be the repercussions if I keep doing these things. I was okay with that. I felt like for 13 years, I'd been in this marriage with somebody where we didn't have a physical connection. We weren't really friends. We would fight. I just was unhappy, and I looked for a connection, and I found a connection with someone outside of the organization, outside of the marriage. In some ways, I don't think I would have left if I hadn't done this kind of destructive thing that I wish I hadn't done. I was never caught. But at that point, it became clear like, hey, I want to be in a relationship that feels good. I'm having to pretend that I believe in all these things that I don't believe in. I am unhappy, and this isn't a way to continue living my life. For a moment, I teased with the idea with myself of like, hey, maybe I should just try and stick around as long as I can for the kids. I went and saw one of my professors one day. I considered her a mentor and a good friend. And I opened up to her about the whole thing. Her advice to me was she compared it to being on a plane where there's an emergency and all the oxygen masks drop. And she says, you have to put that mask on yourself before you can take care of your kids. So don't wait around for them. Do it now and make sure you get out and save yourself. And then at that point, you can take as best care of your kids as possible.
Coming up, Tony decides to tell his wife and family that he is leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses. Shortly after his conversation with his professor, Tony decides to tell his wife and family that he is leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses.
I feel like it was like an out-of-body experience. Like I look back on that day and I don't even know how, I would definitely do it again if I had to, but I don't know how I did it. I wrote letters to my ex-wife, to my dad, and to the elder body, telling them that I no longer wanted to be considered a Jehovah's Witness. So I woke up one morning to go to work. It's like 5 a.m. My ex-wife would wake up early, and I just told her, hey, can you come in the kitchen with me? She comes in the kitchen. I gave her the letter. I spent about a half hour talking to her about it. Hey, I'm not coming home tonight. Here's what's going on. And I apologized to her about any infidelity. And I asked her if she had any questions. She had a question or two for me. And then I left. I drove down the street, called my dad and said, hey, can I meet you? Went to his house, gave him the letter, explained that I was leaving. He just shook his head and just kept on saying, wow, 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 over and over. And he didn't say a word to me, never has said a word to me since. And then I left his house and I called up an elder that I knew would be up early, someone that I liked. And I told him that he should go check on my ex-wife and my dad, and that I had just decided to leave and that I had a letter.
Wow, that's a lot to have to confront and to have to tell your truth to. You said that was the last time that your dad spoke to you. Do y'all speak now? No, absolutely not. I'm the oldest of 4. The next oldest sister texted me and told me that she loved me, but she never wanted to talk to me again. The next sister had previously been disfellowshipped, so she
I think, identified a little more with just like the idea of struggling or how all that works. So her and I talked on the phone for a little while. It was a real tearful conversation. Goodbye. And then my brother, he was out of the country at the time at an international convention with his wife, and him and I never even had a goodbye. My mom texts me that night and she told me that this was a terrible decision I was making and that I was going to be alone from this point forward. I wish I had my family in my life. I wish I had something that was closer to, a little closer to quote unquote normal.
You have children, and are they still practicing?
Yeah.
And how is that dynamic?
It's a really rough one. It's tough. To me, there was a thing right away where I was like fighting with this idea that I had entered this relationship with my now ex, and the two of us had kids with her believing that I was a, dyed in the wool Jehovah's Witness. And, now suddenly here I am telling her, no, I'm not, I'm leaving you. And now for me to try and like outright, like fight for, which way are they going to head? Are they going to follow my direction and leave, or are they going to stick things out with her? So there's a lot of guilt around like, hey, I don't want to, I already like told her, hey, we're going to be married and we're going to raise these kids as Jehovah's Witnesses. And now I'm going to like, the time that they're with me, I'm going to be trying to deprogram them. So there was that, a lot of guilt around how fair or unfair that was to her. And then the other part was I just didn't want to turn this into the kind of thing where they were going to feel the tug of war. So I tried to make sure that they understood where I was coming from. I'm just trying to be authentic and present my side of things to them, but not ever make them feel like they're, part of some struggle between me and my past life.
What is life like for you now?
Are we allowed to swear? It's fucking amazing. If I had had a vision board, a lot of the things on there are just, it's happening.
Right after Tony left the Jehovah's Witnesses, he started using social media to try to connect with local artists. He was inspired to create his own art.
There's a place down here in the Bay Area called Max's Garage that has a print sale each year. About a year after I left, I went to the print sale and I'm walking around the studio and I'm like, man, this is amazing. This community here, what's happening here. I wish I could be part of this. And fast forward 6 years later, I'm like one of the monitors there. I work out of that studio. I'm like friends with all the people that do their artwork there. I met my partner, Yvonne. One of the things that I loved when I was younger was going to shows, going to live music. And then all throughout my late 20s into my 30s, I started having people around me that less and less were into doing that. I went to a few shows by myself. I think I went and saw Ladytron play a show in San Francisco by myself. I went and saw this band called Trail of Dead play a show at the Fillmore. After the show, I was like, man, I'm here by myself. I don't know anyone. I'm enjoying the music, but it just it feels like a little bit of an empty experience. And now here I am at 47, and Yvonne and we're going to like 7 shows between now and October. So it's like, I'm going to live music. I'm doing the art stuff. My career is going great at the hospital where I work. I've made great friends. I have kids in my life. We have a place here in Oakland that we're really happy with. I couldn't be happier with where I am now.
Julie tells me that although she was able to leave the Jehovah's Witnesses as a teenager, she still feels the impact years later.
My mental health is definitely greatly affected. I think just the amount of loneliness and like unpreparedness, I was just kind of like, okay, now what? What do I do? How do I make decisions? How do I make friends? How do I talk to people? What do I do with my spare time? What's a hobby? Like, I just didn't know how to do anything, and I didn't know how to even approach starting to do anything. So that definitely left me very depressed. My early 20s, I was just a big, sad mess. I knew what I didn't want, but I didn't know what I actually wanted.
What's life like for you now?
It's pretty good. I'm married to a great person. We have an awesome house. Got a couple great little pets. I'm tattooing full time. It's really fulfilling. I enjoy it a lot. Yeah, I'm kind of just cruising at the moment. I've got it good. Yeah. Took a long time to get here, but I'm here.
To be honest, I didn't know how much I needed to talk to others about growing up as a Jehovah's Witness until doing these interviews. There were so many moments in these conversations where feelings that I've always had, but that never made sense, finally did. Like the loneliness that Julie felt as a kid that she spoke about, or the weight of living the double life that Tony talked about, the disconnect with holidays, or the complete abandonment from family members and friends. When I came out as queer, my relationship with my father and his family was never the same. My grandmother, my aunts, all of them stopped talking to me. My dad wouldn't even allow me to see my 2 younger half-brothers because he thought my lifestyle, in his words, would potentially turn them gay. And at the time, I was just angry. But over the years, as family members have passed away, including my father and my grandmother, I just get really sad thinking about the time that was wasted, the years that we could have had getting to know one another more. I want to thank Tony and Julie for sharing their stories with us. And I want to thank those that sent in voice memos, John, Shaya, Karama, and Jasper. This organization has taken so much from people, and it continues to. Do you consider the Jehovah's Witnesses a cult?
Yes, absolutely. Abso-fucking-lutely. They're 100% a cult. Essentially, it's just a high control group that uses deception and unethical things to control people. It's a cult. It's harmful.
Absolutely. And I think that people are brainwashed completely.
Absolutely. They are a dangerous, pedophile-protecting, family-destroying, apocalyptic cult and should be avoided at all costs.
Do you believe in God now?
Where I'm at right now in my life, I do not believe in God. I don't see myself ever truly being religious again in any way. I'm not too open to the idea of learning more and changing my opinion on God either.
I definitely don't have any faith in organized religions. I kind of also just don't care that much if there's a God or not. I work on being a good person on my own and living a good life on my own, and I don't feel the need to subscribe to some sort of belief system or structure to help me live a good life or be a good person. I get that that's not for everyone, but that's just where I've come to over these last 2 decades.
I don't believe in God. I'm very atheist/agnostic and very skeptical as well. I just believe that we are just creatures on Earth, and we've created a whole society and we've given meaning to life, but ultimately we're just out here trying to survive.
On the next episode of This Is What It Feels Like.
And now we're at the age where many have lost parents over the last 15 years. Just going through this chapter has kind of been beautiful because everybody reaches out, to support. We all know that when you go through something, you've got a village with your back.
America is experiencing a loneliness epidemic. With more people experiencing isolation than ever before, how can you maintain a long-lasting friendship? We sit down with a group of 20 women who have been friends for over 50 years and ask them just that, in the hopes that we can all learn how to maintain enduring, meaningful friendships through distance, time, and misunderstandings. Thanks for listening to This Is What It Feels Like. This Is What It Feels Like is an independent production, hosted and produced by me, Tara Lopez. Editing by Kelsey Hasty. Sound design, mixing, and mastering by Wes Jones. Original theme song and music produced by Wes Jones. Our designs were created by Justin Hunt Sloan. Photography by Jeffrey Latour. The first season of This Is What It Feels Like was created in collaboration with Cap Radio and is now independently produced. Special thanks to SE Electronics for sponsoring the show. If you want to make sure you don't miss any episodes, follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We've got links to resources in our show notes. For photos of our guests, behind-the-scenes footage, and more, follow us on Instagram at TIWIFL Project or visit us at www.feelslikepod.com, where you can continue the conversation long after the podcast ends.